The first time Damien Moretti saw me, I was covered in rainwater, holding a paper bag of cold medicine, and standing between his mother and death without even knowing her name. The night started like every other terrible Tuesday in November. 12 hours under fluorescent hospital lights. 2 crying kids in pediatrics. 1 exhausted resident who forgot to eat dinner. And me, Claire Bennett, 26 years old, surviving on burnt coffee and stubbornness. By the time my shift ended, Manhattan looked drowned. Rain slammed against the sidewalks hard enough to bounce back like silver needles, soaking my scrubs beneath my coat before I even reached the corner pharmacy. My feet hurt. My back hurt. And the only thing waiting for me at home was leftover Chinese takeout and a studio apartment with a radiator that sounded like it was dying slowly. I pushed through the pharmacy doors at 10:43 p.m., shivering from the cold. The heater inside barely worked, but at least it smelled like soap and peppermint instead of wet concrete and ambulance exhaust. Long night, the cashier asked while scanning my cough drops. I laughed quietly. You ever seen those videos where raccoons look like they've given up on life? He smirked. That bad, huh? Worse. I paid, grabbed the little white paper bag, and stepped back into the storm. That's when I saw her. The woman stood beneath the flickering green pharmacy sign, wearing cream-colored gloves and a dark wool coat that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Late 60s maybe. Elegant in a way people aren't anymore. Like she belonged in old black and white movies where everyone drank champagne on trains and kept dangerous secrets. Rain poured around her in sheets, but she barely moved. One hand rested against the brick wall beside her as if she suddenly felt dizzy. Ma'am. I stepped closer automatically. Nurse instincts never really shut off. Are you okay? She looked up slowly. Pale blue eyes. Tired eyes. Beautiful eyes. I'm fine, she said softly, though she clearly wasn't. Her breathing looked shallow. Her skin too pale beneath the streetlight. You don't look fine. And you look exhausted. I almost smiled at that. Almost. Thunder rolled across the city. Somewhere down the block, tires splashed through standing water. The woman glanced over her shoulder quickly, tension flashing across her face so fast I almost missed it. Fear. Real fear. Then I noticed the black SUV parked across the street. Engine running. Headlights off. My stomach tightened. Is someone bothering you? I asked carefully. No, too fast. Too rehearsed. She clutched her handbag tighter. Her white gloves trembled slightly now. I knew that kind of shaking. Adrenaline. Panic trying to stay hidden beneath good manners. Ma'am, I said gently. I can call somebody for you. Another flash of lightning lit the street. And for 1 second, I saw it clearly. A tiny red dot trembling against the center of her coat. My brain recognized it before my mouth could form words. Laser sight. Everything inside me went cold. The woman turned toward me at the exact moment I heard tires screech somewhere nearby. Then a voice shouted from across the street. Sharp. Urgent. Mail. Mrs. Moretti. I didn't think. I didn't calculate. My body moved before fear could catch up. I grabbed the woman around the shoulders and threw us both sideways just as the first deafening cracks split through the rain. The world became rain, screaming tires, and the brutal sound of my own heartbeat. I hit the pavement hard with the woman trapped beneath me, my shoulder slamming against the soaked concrete as another crack echoed through the street. Glass exploded somewhere behind us. People started screaming. Car alarms erupted one after another like the entire block had suddenly woken up angry. Stay down, I shouted, though I could barely hear myself over the storm. The woman clutched my coat with trembling fingers. Her breathing was uneven now. Panicked. Terrified. I lifted my head just enough to see shadows moving near the black SUV across the street. Men in dark suits. One of them was yelling into an earpiece while another pulled open the back door of the vehicle. Then came the sound that froze everything around me. Mother! The voice cut through the rain like thunder. Deep. Controlled. Furious. I turned instinctively toward it and saw him for the first time. He stepped out of another SUV that had just skidded onto the curb sideways, headlights flooding the street in white light. Tall. Broad shoulders beneath a black wool coat darkened by rain. Sharp features. Dark hair slicked back from his face. And eyes so cold they did not look real. The men around him moved immediately, surrounding him without being asked. Protective. Armed. Dangerous. But he barely noticed them. His attention locked entirely on the woman beneath me. Evelyn. he said again, faster this time. Fear cracked through his voice for half a second, just enough to sound human. He crossed the street at a near run, expensive shoes splashing through puddles as another sharp sound split the air nearby. Someone shouted from the alley. One of the suited men reacted instantly, moving toward the sound while others formed a shield around us. Everything happened too fast after that. Hands grabbed my shoulders carefully. Someone lifted the older woman from beneath me. Another pair of hands tried helping me up, but the second I moved, pain tore through my side so violently my knees nearly gave out again. Claire. The woman looked back at me with horror filling her pale blue eyes. I blinked in confusion. I had never told her my name. Then I realized my hospital badge still hung from my coat pocket. Her gloved fingers shook as she reached for me again. She protected me. Evelyn whispered weakly toward the man kneeling beside her. Damien, she protected me. Damien. The name settled heavily in the air around him. Even before anyone else reacted, I understood exactly what kind of man he was. Not because of the bodyguards. Not because of the black SUVs. Because everyone near him moved with the same silent fear people carry around loaded weapons. His eyes found me then. Dark green, empty and sharp at the same time. Rainwater slid down his face, but he did not blink once. His gaze dropped to my side. I followed it automatically and finally saw the blood soaking through my light blue scrubs beneath my coat. For a second, my brain refused to process it. The warmth, the dizziness, the strange pressure spreading through my ribs. No, Evelyn breathed. Damien moved. Instantly, one hand caught me before I hit the ground again. The other pressed firmly against my side, his jaw tightening when he saw the blood on his fingers. Look at me, he ordered quietly. I tried. I really did. But the streetlights had started blurring into long streaks of gold and white. Ambulance is 3 minutes out, one of the men shouted nearby. Damien ignored him completely. His expensive coat was soaked now, knees pressed against dirty Manhattan pavement as he held pressure against my wound with hands that looked more familiar with power than tenderness. Stay awake, he said. Not loudly, not cruelly, desperately. It was the desperation that scared me most. Because men like Damien Moretti probably did not panic often. And yet his voice shook when he looked down at me. Claire, he said again, softer this time. Do not close your eyes. The ambulance smelled like antiseptic, rainwater, and fear. Mine mostly. I drifted in and out beneath flashing white lights while paramedics pressed gauze against my side and shouted numbers I could barely understand. My body felt strangely heavy, like I was sinking beneath dark water 1 inch at a time. But every single time my eyes started closing, I heard his voice again. Stay with me. Damien Moretti sat directly across from me inside the moving ambulance, one hand braced against the metal wall as the vehicle tore through Manhattan traffic. He had blood on his knuckles. My blood. His black coat hung open now, soaked completely through, expensive fabric wrinkled from kneeling in the rain. Men like him were not supposed to look disheveled. They were supposed to look untouchable, controlled. Perfect. But Damien looked furious at the universe itself. One of the paramedics glanced at him nervously. Sir, we need room to work. Damien did not even look away from me. Then work faster. The paramedic swallowed hard and obeyed immediately. I wanted to laugh at how ridiculous that was. I wanted to tell them all they were overreacting. But another wave of pain rolled through my ribs so sharply it stole the breath from my lungs. My fingers twitched weakly against the stretcher. Damien noticed instantly. Of course he did. He noticed everything. His hand closed carefully around mine. Warm. Steady. Dangerous. Claire. His voice lowered slightly. Look at me. I forced my eyes open again. The inside of the ambulance blurred around the edges, but his face stayed painfully clear. Sharp jaw. Rain-dark hair. Eyes carrying the kind of exhaustion that no amount of money could fix. Your mother, I whispered weakly. Is she okay? Something changed in his expression then. Not softer exactly. Worse. Like I had somehow wounded him in a place bullets could not reach. You almost died, he said quietly. And you were asking about her. I frowned slightly. She looked scared. Damien stared at me for a long second before looking away toward the ambulance doors. The muscles in his jaw tightened hard enough to pulse. Nobody protected her before you, he said. The confession sounded accidental. Like the words escaped before he could stop them. Silence filled the ambulance except for sirens and rain hammering against the roof. Then Damien pulled out his phone. Lock down St. Vincent's emergency wing, he said coldly into the receiver. Nobody enters without my authorization. A pause. His eyes flicked back toward me. I do not care who complains. Another pause. His expression darkened further. And find out who gave the order tonight. Even half-conscious, I felt the temperature inside the ambulance drop. Whoever Damien Moretti truly was beneath those tailored suits and calm manners. People feared him for a reason. The ambulance finally slammed to a stop beneath bright emergency lights. Doors flew open immediately. Nurses rushed forward with a trauma team already waiting. But the second Damien stepped out behind my stretcher, the entire entrance went silent for half a heartbeat. Doctors recognized him. Security guards recognized him. Even exhausted nurses suddenly stood straighter. Fear moved through the emergency room faster than the stretcher wheels. Level 1 trauma, somebody shouted. Female, mid-20s, responsive but unstable. Bright hospital lights burned above me as they pushed me through automatic doors. Familiar ceilings. Familiar disinfectant smell. I had spent years saving people in places like this. Now I was the patient instead. The thought terrified me more than the shooting. I reached weakly for the nearest sleeve before they wheeled me farther away. Damien stopped instantly beside the stretcher. Do not let me die, I whispered before I could stop myself. His face went completely still. Then he leaned down close enough for me to hear him over the chaos around us. Claire, he said softly, with terrifying certainty. I would burn this entire city to the ground first. When I opened my eyes again, everything was white. White ceiling, white curtains, white sheets tucked tightly around my body. For one disoriented second, I thought I was back at work after accidentally falling asleep in an empty patient room again. Then pain spread slowly through my ribs like fire waking up beneath my skin, and reality crashed back all at once. The rain, the street, the woman in gloves. Damien Moretti. A monitor beeped steadily beside me. Somewhere outside the room, footsteps moved quickly across polished floors. Low voices. Security radios. I blinked hard, trying to clear the fog from my head. My throat felt dry enough to crack. You are awake. The voice came from the corner of the room. Deep, calm, dangerous even at low volume. Damien sat near the window in a dark chair, elbows resting against his knees, still wearing the same black clothes from the night before. Except now his tie was gone, the top buttons of his shirt undone slightly, and exhaustion carved sharp shadows beneath his eyes. Morning light spilled across one side of his face, while the other stayed hidden in shadow. He looked less like a businessman now, more like the kind of man newspapers avoided naming directly. My pulse monitor sped up immediately. His eyes flicked toward the screen once before returning to me. Relax, he said quietly. You are safe here. Safe. Something about hearing that word from him should not have been comforting, and yet somehow it was. I tried sitting up slightly before pain forced a sharp breath from my lungs. Damien stood instantly. The movement was so fast it startled me. 1 second he was across the room. The next he was beside the bed adjusting my pillow carefully with large, steady hands. Do not move too quickly, he said. The doctors repaired the damage, but you lost a significant amount of blood. I stared at him in confusion. How long was I unconscious? Almost 16 hours. 16 hours. Panic hit immediately. My phone. My voice sounded rough. I need to call the hospital. They are probably short-staffed, and your supervisor has already been informed. Of course he had handled it already. How do you even know where I work? Damien looked at me like the answer should have been obvious. Claire Bennett, pediatric nurse at St. Gabriel Medical Center. 26 years old. Lives alone in Queens. Volunteers twice a month at a free children's clinic in Brooklyn. My stomach tightened slowly. You investigated me? I protected you. The answer came instantly, like there was a difference. Silence settled between us. Outside the room, I noticed 2 men in black suits standing near the ICU entrance through the glass wall. Security, not hospital security. Damien followed my gaze calmly. Nobody enters this floor without my approval. That seems excessive. His jaw tightened slightly. Someone attempted to kill my mother last night. The words landed heavily between us. Attempted, not random violence, not an accident. Something planned, something deliberate. A chill moved slowly through me despite the warmth of the blankets. Who are you? I asked quietly. Damien studied me for a long moment before answering. Someone with many enemies. Honest. Not comforting, but honest. I looked down at the bandages wrapped carefully around my side. I did not know who she was. I know. His voice softened slightly for the first time. That is why this matters. Before I could respond, the ICU door opened gently behind him. The older woman from the street stepped inside, wearing a pale cashmere coat, now instead of the rain-soaked one from last night. Evelyn Moretti looked healthier this morning, but her eyes immediately filled with emotion the second she saw me awake. Claire. She crossed the room quickly and took my hand between both of hers. Her white gloves were gone now. Her hands felt cold and delicate. You saved my life. I shook my head weakly. Anyone would have done the same thing. Damien looked at me then with an expression I could not fully understand. Not disbelief. Worse, like he knew with absolute certainty that almost nobody in his world would have done the same thing. By the third day, St. Vincent's ICU no longer felt like a hospital. It felt like a fortress pretending to be one. Men in dark suits stood outside every entrance. Expensive black SUVs lined the street below 24 hours a day. Nurses whispered when Damien Moretti walked through the halls. Doctors straightened like soldiers during inspections. And somehow, despite all of it, he still sat beside my hospital bed every single night. I noticed it accidentally at first. The chair near the window would be empty when I fell asleep. Then I would wake up at 3 in the morning to the quiet sound of pages turning, and there he would be under dim lighting, reading reports while the city glowed behind him. Sometimes on his phone speaking softly in Italian. Sometimes just watching the monitors beside my bed with an intensity that made my chest tighten. It was unnerving. Nobody should look that dangerous while adjusting someone's blanket carefully at 2 in the morning. You need sleep, I told him once after waking up to find him still wearing the same black suit from the day before. Damien barely looked up from the tablet in his hands. So do you? I am literally hospitalized. That is different. One corner of his mouth moved slightly. Not quite a smile. More like his face had forgotten how to do it properly. The doctors disagree. You keep trying to work from your bed. I glanced guiltily toward the chart beside me. He had caught me reviewing pediatric case notes again earlier that morning. Children still get sick just because I got shot, I muttered. Silence. Then Damien slowly lowered the tablet onto the table beside him. Claire. His voice became quieter somehow. More serious. You are allowed to care about yourself too. The words hit harder than they should have. Maybe because nobody had said something like that to me in years. Before I could answer, the ICU door opened. Gently, and Evelyn walked in carrying a small white bakery box tied with ribbon. Her pale silver coat matched the elegant pearls around her neck today. Somehow, even hospital lighting could not make her look ordinary. I brought cannoli, she announced softly. The real kind from Brooklyn. Not the tourist garbage. I laughed before I could stop myself, then instantly winced from the pain in my ribs. Damien stood immediately. Careful. You hover too much, I told him. Evelyn smiled knowingly while placing the bakery box beside my bed. He gets that from his father. Damien gave his mother a warning look that clearly meant do not continue this conversation. She ignored him completely. When Damien was 8 years old, he followed me into a grocery store because he thought someone looked suspicious. Mother. The poor cashier nearly fainted because my son stared at him for 20 minutes without blinking. I looked toward Damien in disbelief. You were an intimidating child? Apparently. Evelyn sat beside my bed carefully. You should see him now when he worries. Damien exhaled slowly through his nose while I tried unsuccessfully not to smile again. The tension in the room softened for the first time since I met them. Warmer somehow. Human. Then Evelyn reached for my hand gently. Claire, she said quietly. You saved my life while complete strangers ran away. Her blue eyes flicked briefly toward her son. And while men who were supposed to protect me failed, the air shifted instantly. Damien's expression darkened slightly, though he said nothing. Evelyn squeezed my fingers softly. Do you know what my son did after surgery? I shook my head. He threatened 3 surgeons and donated $2 million to the trauma wing in the same hour. Mother. What? It is true. I stared at Damien. You donated $2 million? He looked almost annoyed that she mentioned it. The hospital needed upgraded pediatric equipment. That was yesterday, Evelyn corrected gently. Before meeting you, Damien had never once noticed the pediatric floor existed. For the first time since waking up in that hospital room, Damien Moretti looked away first. The nightmares started on the 5th night. I woke up gasping just after midnight, heart pounding violently against my ribs as rain and flashing red lights replayed behind my eyes. For one terrifying second, I thought I was back on the sidewalk again. Cold pavement beneath me, blood soaking through my scrubs, a laser sight trembling across white gloves. My breathing spiraled too fast, too sharp. Machines beside my bed immediately began beeping louder. Claire. The voice cut through the panic instantly. Damien appeared beside the bed so quickly I did not even hear the chair move. One hand gently steadied my shoulder while the other silenced the monitor alarm before nurses could rush in. Look at me. I tried, but my chest felt too tight to breathe properly. It is okay, he said quietly. You are safe. Safe. That word again. I closed my eyes briefly, forcing air slowly back into my lungs. Damien stayed beside me the entire time, calm and solid like a wall refusing to move. After a minute, the shaking finally eased enough for me to speak. Sorry, I whispered hoarsely. You do not apologize for surviving. His tone sharpened slightly at the last word. Like survival itself was personal to him now. I leaned back carefully against the pillows, exhausted. Moonlight spilled through the ICU windows behind him, outlining the sharp lines of his face in silver and shadow. He still looked fully dressed despite the hour. Dark shirt, tailored slacks, expensive watch catching faint light when he moved. Do you ever sleep? I asked weakly. Damien glanced toward the rain outside. Not much lately. Because of me? Silence answered first. Then finally, because someone tried to take something from me. The way he said it made my stomach tighten slightly. Not cold. Not possessive exactly. Worse. Certain. Before I could respond, movement outside the ICU caught his attention. One of the suited guards approached the glass doors quickly, speaking quietly into an earpiece. Damien's entire posture changed immediately. The warmth vanished. His expression hardened into something colder than the storm outside. Dangerous. The guard stepped inside a second later. Sir. He nodded respectfully toward me. First before focusing on Damien. We found another vehicle near Queens. Damien's jaw tightened. And it belonged to one of Petrov's men. The room went completely still. Even half awake, I felt the tension sharpen like broken glass. Damien looked toward me briefly before speaking again. Outside, the guard hesitated. Sir, there is more. Damien stood slowly. What? There was a message. Silence. For Miss Bennett. My pulse immediately sped up again. Damien's face went terrifyingly blank. What message? The guard swallowed once. They said the nurse should have died too. Every monitor beside my bed started beeping faster again. Damien did not react outwardly at first. That was the frightening part. No shouting. No threats. Just stillness. Complete and absolute stillness. Then he turned toward me slowly, and I realized something had changed in his eyes. Not fear. Rage controlled so tightly it looked calm. Leave us, he told the guard quietly. The man disappeared immediately. Damien walked back toward my bed with measured steps before stopping directly beside me. Claire. His voice dropped lower than I had ever heard it. Listen carefully. I stared up at him, suddenly unable to breathe normally again. The men responsible for that attack now know your name. My hands tightened around the blanket instinctively. Because of me? Because you protected my mother. His eyes locked onto mine with terrifying intensity. And because you matter to me now. The words settled heavily between us. My heart stumbled once against my ribs. Damien reached into the inside pocket of his coat, slowly before removing a small velvet box. Black. Elegant. My breath caught instantly. He opened it carefully. Inside rested an antique diamond ring surrounded by delicate emeralds that glimmered beneath the ICU lights. Family heirloom. Old money. Old promises. Damien's gaze never left mine. Marry me, Claire. I forgot how to breathe for a second. The ring glimmered softly beneath the ICU lights while rain tapped against the windows behind him like impatient fingers. Damien Moretti stood beside my hospital bed, holding a marriage proposal like it was a declaration of war. Calm. Certain. Terrifyingly serious. You cannot be serious, I whispered. I have never been more serious in my life. My pulse monitor immediately betrayed me by speeding up again. Damien glanced once toward the machine before looking back at me with that same unnerving focus he always had. Like the rest of the world existed too far away to matter. We barely know each other, I said weakly. I know enough. Damien. Claire. My name sounded different in his voice now. Softer somehow. More dangerous because of it. I pushed myself slightly higher against the pillows despite the ache in my ribs. You are asking me to marry you because somebody threatened me. I am asking because I refuse to bury you. The room went completely silent after that. No monitors. No rain. No city noise outside the windows. Just those words sitting heavily between us. Damien exhaled slowly before sitting beside the bed again. The velvet ring box remained open in his hand. The moment you protected my mother, he said quietly, you became connected to my world whether I wanted that or not. And do you want that? His jaw tightened slightly. No, the honesty startled me. But it happened anyway. He leaned back slightly in the chair, eyes dark beneath the low lighting. Men have spent years trying to reach me through the people I care about. My mother. My businesses. My name. His gaze locked onto mine again. Now there is you. I swallowed hard. So this is protection. Partly. And the other part. For the first time since meeting him, Damien looked uncertain. The expression lasted less than a second, but I saw it. A crack in the armor. The other part, he said slowly, is that every time I leave this room, I think about coming back. My heart betrayed me again. Harder this time. He noticed. Of course he noticed. Claire. His voice lowered. I know how insane this sounds. That is one word for it. Something almost resembling amusement flickered briefly across his face before disappearing again. Then the ICU door opened softly behind him. Evelyn stepped into the room wearing a pale gray sweater and carrying a thermos of coffee. She stopped immediately the second she noticed the ring box in Damien's hand. Her elegant eyebrows lifted slowly. Oh, she said carefully. You actually did it. I stared between them. You knew about this? Evelyn looked entirely too calm. My son spent the last 4 hours arguing with himself in the hallway. Damien muttered something in Italian beneath his breath. He rehearsed 3 different speeches. Evelyn continued pleasantly. One of them sounded like a hostage negotiation. Mother. The second one sounded worse. Despite everything, I laughed softly before wincing again from the pain in my ribs. Damien instantly leaned forward. Careful. Evelyn watched both of us quietly, then smiled in a way that made my chest tighten unexpectedly. Claire, she said gently, my son has many flaws. Damien sighed heavily beside me. Many, Evelyn repeated calmly. But when Damien Moretti loves something, he protects it with his entire soul. The room became very still after that word. Loves. Damien did not correct her, did not deny it. He simply looked at me with those impossible dark green eyes while rain painted silver patterns against the ICU windows behind him. Then he reached for my hand carefully. Warm fingers. Steady grip. Marry me, he said again softly. And nobody will ever make you face this alone. I should have said no immediately. Any sane woman would have. I was a pediatric nurse from Queens with student loans, frozen meals in my apartment freezer, and a life so ordinary it barely left fingerprints on the city. Damien Moretti belonged to a completely different universe. The kind filled with armored SUVs, whispered fear, and men who carried danger in their suit jackets. And yet when he looked at me beside that hospital bed, none of it felt fake. Terrifying. Complicated. Completely irrational. But not fake. I need time, I whispered finally. Damien's expression did not change, but something in his shoulders loosened slightly. Relief maybe. Take all the time you need. Evelyn looked between us knowingly before standing from the chair near my bed. I should let the two of you talk before my son scares you again with his intensity. Mother. Damien. Darling. You proposed marriage in an intensive care unit while armed guards patrol the hallway. She patted his shoulder gently while passing him. The intensity ship sailed hours ago. The ICU door closed softly behind her, leaving silence in its wake. Rain continued tapping against the windows while the city glowed silver and gold below us. Damien still held my hand carefully between both of his now large hands. Warm hands. Hands that looked built for destruction, somehow holding me like something fragile. You really would do this? I asked quietly. Marry someone you met 5 days ago? Claire. His thumb brushed lightly across my knuckles. I have known people for 20 years who would not have done what you did for my mother. I looked down at our hands. I did not think about it. Exactly. His voice roughened slightly. That is the part one cannot stop thinking about. Before I could answer, raised voices echoed suddenly from outside the ICU hallway. Sharp. Fast. One of Damien's guards stepped into view through the glass doors, speaking urgently into an earpiece. Damien stood immediately. Every trace of softness vanished from his face in an instant. It happened so fast it almost gave me chills. 1 second, he was the exhausted man holding my hand beside a hospital bed. The next, he looked like the person New York whispered about behind closed doors. "Stay here," he said quietly. "I am serious, Claire." He crossed the room toward the hallway, just as another man appeared outside the glass doors. Tall, dark gray suit, silver hair at the temples. Something about him made every guard straighten instantly. The older man's sharp eyes found Damien first, then me. His expression hardened slightly. Damien stepped into the hallway, but through the glass I still saw the tension in his jaw. The older man spoke quickly in Italian. Damien answered colder, shorter, dangerous. Then the older man looked directly toward my hospital room again. I could not hear the conversation, but I felt it, like thunder before lightning. A few seconds later, Damien re-entered the ICU alone, shutting the door firmly behind him. "Who was that?" I asked carefully. "My uncle." Not comforting somehow. Damien loosened the cuffs of his black shirt slightly before looking toward the rain outside. "There is something I need to tell you." My stomach tightened instantly. That sentence never ends well. A faint shadow of amusement crossed his face before disappearing. The attack on my mother was not random. I figured that part out already. The problem is not the attack itself. His eyes met mine again. Cold now. Controlled. It is that someone inside my organization helped arrange it. Silence. "Someone close to you?" Damien nodded once. Close enough to know my mother's movements. A chill spread slowly through me despite the heated hospital room. "And they know about me now too." "Yes." Honest again. Always brutally honest. Damien walked back toward the bed slowly before crouching slightly beside me. "Claire, if there is betrayal inside my family, I cannot guarantee your safety anywhere outside my protection." "You mean outside your world?" His gaze sharpened slightly. "No," he reached for my hand again carefully. "I mean outside my sight." My heart stumbled once. Then the ICU lights flickered suddenly overhead. Just once. Brief. But enough to make every guard outside react instantly. Damien's expression went completely still. The kind of stillness that comes right before disaster. Then every monitor beside my bed suddenly went black. The darkness lasted less than 3 seconds. But in those 3 seconds, I understood exactly how fear could swallow an entire room alive. The monitors beside my bed died first. Then the overhead lights vanished. Outside the ICU windows, Manhattan still glowed through the rain. But inside the room, everything turned black and silent except for my heartbeat hammering against my ribs. "Claire." Damien's voice reached me instantly through the darkness. Calm. Controlled. Too controlled. I heard movement near the door. Fast footsteps. A radio crackling somewhere outside. Then emergency backup lights flooded the ICU in dim red illumination that painted everything in shadows. Damien stood directly beside my bed now. One hand braced protectively against the mattress beside me while his eyes scanned every inch of the room with lethal focus. The soft man who held my hand at night disappeared completely. This was the real Damien Moretti, the one people feared. The ICU doors burst open a second later. 4 guards entered immediately, surrounding the room in complete silence. Not panicked. Trained. Damien never looked away from me. "Take my mother downstairs," he ordered coldly. "Double security." One of the guards nodded once before disappearing again. Another stepped toward Damien quickly. "Sir, the outage was isolated to this floor only." Silence. My stomach dropped instantly. Damien's jaw tightened. "Intentional," I whispered. His eyes met mine briefly. "Yes." The guard handed Damien a phone. "We intercepted a call from the garage level." Damien listened silently for several seconds before his expression darkened into something terrifyingly calm. "Lock the building," he said quietly. "Nobody leaves." The guard disappeared instantly. I stared at Damien while red emergency lights painted sharp shadows across his face. "This is insane," I whispered. "This is my life." The answer came without emotion. Somehow that made it worse. He moved closer beside the bed again, lowering his voice. "Claire, listen carefully to me." His fingers wrapped gently around mine despite the chaos around us. "There is a safe residence outside the city. I can move you there tonight." "Like hiding me?" "Like keeping you alive." I closed my eyes briefly. 5 days ago, my biggest problem had been student loan payments and exhaustion from double shifts. Now armed guards blocked hospital hallways while one of the most feared men in New York discussed moving me into hiding. None of it felt real. Damien, I whispered quietly, what happens if this never stops? Something flickered across his face then. Not anger. Pain. Deep and hidden and exhausted. It stops, he said softly. Because I will end it. Before I could answer, the ICU door opened again. But this time nobody announced themselves. Damien reacted instantly, stepping slightly in front of my bed without thinking. Protective. Automatic. The older man from earlier entered slowly instead. Damien's uncle. Silver hair. Expensive charcoal suit. Eyes sharp enough to cut glass. The traitor has been identified, he said calmly. Damien's entire body went still. Who? The older man hesitated once. Just once. Vincent. The name hit Damien like a physical blow, even though his face barely changed. I noticed anyway. The tiny shift in his breathing. The way his fingers tightened around mine. Your cousin? I asked softly before I could stop myself. Damien looked away briefly. My brother. Silence crashed through the room. His brother. The betrayal suddenly felt heavier. Personal. I watched Damien carefully, then understood something important for the first time. Underneath the power, the wealth, the fear, this man was tired. Tired of losing people. Tired of protecting everyone alone. His uncle spoke again quietly. Vincent disappeared an hour ago. Damien nodded once. Cold again. Controlled again. Find him. The older man left immediately. Rain battered the hospital windows harder now. Thunder rolling across Manhattan in low, violent waves. Damien stayed motionless beside my bed for several seconds before finally looking down at me again. His expression softened the smallest amount. Enough to break my heart a little. You should run from me, he said quietly. Probably. But you are not going to. I looked at the ring box still resting near the hospital tray beside my bed. Emeralds catching dim red emergency light. Then back at the man standing beside me like he carried the entire weight of the city on his shoulders. No, I whispered softly. I do not think I am. For the first time since I met him, Damien Moretti smiled completely. Small, tired, real, and somehow that expression terrified me more than anything else ever had.